Okay, so we're moving through our modulation sources. We've talked about envelopes, and we've talked about low frequency oscillators and the stepper, and now it's time to talk about the performer, which happens to be my favorite modulation source for whatever reason. I'm not sure why, but it's just a lot of fun. So let's get into a quick overview of the parameters included in the performer, and then in the following lecture we'll talk about how to apply it. So I'm going to select this LFO page and move over to the performer like this. So you'll notice some similarities to the stepper as well as some differences. First of all, we have sort of a sequencer. First of all, we have our 16 steps here, just like with the stepper, but with the small difference is that you can have a different curve for each step. Rather than just a vertical bar, which was in the stepper, we can select a different curve for each step, which we'll get to in a moment. And instead of one row of modulation, you have two. Similar to the LFO, remember we had two different LFO options as well as a crossfader between the two. Well, the same is true with the performer. You have two different rows, and you can use this crossfade fader to move between the two sequencer rows like this. Remember that this fader only applies when you have activated the boxes down here. So you can tell it, okay, I only want to fade between these two rows on step number 7 and 9. And then in that case, you would want to drag this down to the bottom to tell it, okay, crossfade between the two only on 7 and 9. Also similar to, if none of these boxes are selected, then there's no crossfade applied. It will just use the top row. Also similar to the stepper is you have a amp mod fader over here, which corresponds to these boxes at the bottom row. So if you want to control the amplitude of particular steps, you can select them here, and when this fader is at the bottom, I'm telling the sequencer to drop the amplitude to 0 on steps 4 and 9. Okay. And by default, the amplitude is at full volume when none of these are selected. You also have, just like the other modulation sources, you have a rate knob, which disappears when you select sync, and now I have a ratio as well as a position button. I also have an amp knob that controls the overall amplitude of this modulation. I can, in the menu section, I can select from some factory presets as well as my own presets that I've saved, and then you can also copy and paste some different patterns to other performers if you want to do it that way. I have a save button, a delete menu, and then again you can randomize different parameters, the upper levels, the upper curves, upper performer. You can just randomize the entire thing. You can randomize all, okay? And then when you click this multiple times, it will just give you a new random pattern, which is pretty cool. So that brings us to this load curve button. When I click the load curve button, my parameters on the left disappear and a curve palette appears. And with the curve palette, I can actually draw in my own patterns here. So you can see with this random pattern, there's all these different curves in each step. So I can select just like this upwards linear ramp, drop it into step 6 like this by clicking. And then I can also control the amplitude like this, just clicking up and down, dragging up and down, or you can use your mouse wheel or using the holding the shift key will let you adjust with a finer resolution. If I want to apply this curve to more than one step, then I will click the curve and then hold the shift key and just drag across the field like this. And that way I can apply multiples. Because otherwise, let's say I want to drop this one into 7 and I want to put it in 8 as well. Well, I'm not able to because my curve has been deselected and now I'm just adjusting the amplitude. So you can click it and then shift click in different steps, or shift click and drag to apply it to all of the steps. So I can throw in any random curve that I want like this. I'm using the shift key to click and put in some square like that. Okay, so that's the way you're going to draw your own performer sequencer. And just like with the stepper, you can control the number of steps by clicking and dragging up here. So I can tell it to only move through these 8 steps, and I can also change the starting point. So that will be it for the overview of the performer. In the next lecture, let's talk about how to apply it and make some sound.